everyone. Carolyn Rice, School Board Chair. This administrative, informal, and workshop session of this meeting of the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach, Virginia is hereby convened at 3:00 p.m. on this 24th day of May 2022. Members of the public, as always, are able to observe this meeting through live streaming on vbschools.com, broadcast on VBTV Channel 47, and on Zoom. And we do welcome those present with us in person here today. The school board's protocol is to break at 5:30 to prepare for the formal session school board meeting to begin at 6 o'clock. This session will conclude no later than 5:45 to allow the school board and administration time to prepare for the formal session to begin at 6 o'clock. So with that, Madam Clerk, would you please announce those school board members in attendance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Present in the school board chambers are Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, Ms. Anderson, Ms. Felton, Ms. Franklin, Ms. Holtz, Ms. Hughes, Ms. Manning, Ms. Owens, and Ms. Weems.
Thank you. So with admin matters, I want to start by thanking Mrs. Melnick for stepping in my stead at the May 11th meetings. And it's great to be back with everybody today. Graduations, a big celebration month is forthcoming, and I do want to remind my colleagues that the grid of the ceremony dates and times is on the SharePoint site, and if you have not yet responded, there's instructions there on who to respond to by Friday. A few related notes to that. Some other dates have come our way. So if you all want to make a note, and there'll be written confirmation of this, that the Renaissance graduation is that Friday at 2:30 to 4:30. So it's recognized that does overlap with a few other ceremonies, but we're blessed with 11 board members, so decision time for all of you there. We got an email, and that's, I'm told, going to be in the Renaissance Academy Scola. So just keep that in mind, too, as you make your decisions. Project Search, I think the email came through just this morning, if I'm not mistaken. But they're actually having a graduation on Tuesday, June 14th at 1:30 to 2:30. And that's before any of the comprehensive ceremonies kick in. The first will be Bayside Tuesday at 4 o'clock. So it is possible for you all to do anything for that date. And the summer school graduation, ironically, I think, or maybe that was the one that just came through today, that's the August 18th, but for those of you who like to plan ahead, that's typically, if I recall, more an evening time. So we'll certainly get more details on that as that date approaches. So I do believe that covers it right now for graduations. And the only other thing I was going to mention, sticking with this celebration theme, that I was one of a number of colleagues who had the benefit of attending our new school dedications from the last week or so, Princess Anne Middle and Thorogood Elementary. And I know before that was the Brock class, the new Brock classroom. So just a great way for the community to convene to recognize even the professionals who took part in these processes, from the architects to the engineers and construction firms. Certainly some of the alumni from these schools too, the past and present administrations who worked through, even more than typical challenging circumstances through the pandemic to keep these projects on target. So I'll end it here and see if anybody else has anything to share at this time. Mrs. Weems.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Soltner, Dr. Jameson, and Mr. Delaney and I made a quick road trip up to New Jersey last week to visit a recovery high school there. We've got a lot of great information. It was very helpful, and we'll be presenting you all the information at our school board retreat in July. Also, I don't know if you're aware of it, but with the help of, again, Mr. Delaney, I've put together a speaking group of panelists that are going to go visit 4 of our high schools this year, and hopefully all the middle and high schools next year, about substance abuse and misuse. And we started today at Kellum. We have 22 presentations in 7 days. And so we did 3 of them today, and we have already gotten extremely positive feedback of what a great impact it was this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Mrs. Felton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just like to remind the school board that on June 2nd and the 3rd, we will be holding the VSBA Executive Board meeting. And if you have any questions or concerns, you can jot down or send to me that you want to be considered during that time. Also, on June the 3rd with the VSBA, we will be convening at the school law conference as well. So just want to remind you, and that will be a hybrid. You can tune in on the internet if you choose to watch this conference. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Or else we'll wait on committee reports for the rest. Very good. All right, so moving on to the first of a series of presentations today. We begin with Dr. Rogers, our Chief Academic Officer. Welcome, and this is an update on instructional and library materials, practices, procedures, and regs. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Chairwoman Ryan. I think I know how to do this as many times as I present, right? Okay.
We're taking a moment here.
There we go. All right, fantastic. All right, try this again. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, school board members, as well as Dr. Spence. In October of this school year, I provided you with an update on our instructional materials review process. I shared what we consider to be instructional materials, the considerations we give for securing instructional materials, the processes by which we select textbooks, software resources, and library materials. And I finally provided an overview of our processes for reviewing challenged instructional materials. Relatedly, this past February, we shared with you the results of 6 book reviews that were completed by 6 different review committees using the processes that are outlined in our Virginia Beach City Public Schools Regulation 7-12.1. And this afternoon, I will provide you with an update on our practices, procedures, and regulations on instructional and library materials, and will help to answer recent questions and concerns that are relative to the appropriateness of some of our library books. I first want to remind the board that that VBCPS has and will continue to work with our families in order to honor their values and address concerns that they may have relative to instructional resources and library resources. I want to encourage our families to continue to partner with their children's school by contacting their child's teacher, their principal, or library media specialist, of which I will refer to as LMSs from this point on, to share any important information and concerns that they may have with instructional or library materials. So let's recap what instructional materials are. As a reminder, instructional materials are those materials that are used by a teacher to simplify teaching. They include both visual and audiovisual aids that are either printed or digital. Library materials are a little different in that library materials are supplemental resources for students and for staff. They include books that are read for leisure, periodicals or magazines, and reference materials. And as has been shared with you previously, several considerations take place prior to securing instructional materials in our school division. Print and digital materials that are used in classrooms to support curriculum are selected and used the following criteria. They are aligned to Virginia Standards of Learning as well as VBCPS curriculum. We consider the copyright date as well as the cost. We take input from staff who represent various age group of students and subjects that they teach. And we also consider the interest of all students. The materials that are selected are balanced to represent many points of view that concern problems and issues on the local, state, national, and international levels and should have a contemporary significance or a permanent value. We also consider ease of access, readability for our students, academic value, and of course, we get feedback from the public. So relative to our library materials and the selection process there, our LMSs follow VPCPS Regulation 6-65.2, where the school's collection is examined at least once annually to identify materials that are no longer appropriate for inclusion. And those materials could be materials that are outdated, they've not been checked out in several years, or no longer appropriate for students. We have over 1 million titles in our school division. Our high schools have thousands of books in their collection, and LMSs regularly weed books in that manner. Approximately 95% of our LMSs have master's degrees in library media science, and they take courses on book selection, as well as participate in professional development on coaching and partnering with our teachers. If you'll remember from our previous discussions, schools are provided with funding where they have the flexibility to purchase library books and digital resources. All library materials for checkout are required to be ordered in BuySpeed, which is our purchasing program, and through two vendors called Mackin or the Junior Library Guild. At least 80% of school library funds are spent on Mackin books, and up to 20% of those funds are used with the Junior Library Guild. Mackin is referred to as a book jobber that provides high-quality, age-appropriate library and classroom materials for students in grades pre-K through 12, and they even support colleges and universities. The Junior Library Guild is a completely customizable collection. It's a collection development service that's based 100% on school preference, as well as the school students' interests. And those schools that participate in the Junior Library Guild receive books monthly. So we do understand the concern that some of our families have had regarding the appropriateness of a couple of books as of late in our libraries recently, especially the pictorial ones or the graphic novels. And we thank those persons for bringing those to our attention so that we can address them quickly using the existing policies that we have as well as the processes that we have in place. And through those processes, I do want to reiterate, as was shared in the beginning of this presentation, that we encourage our families to share those concerns regarding instructional and library materials with our school-based staff. Schools have and will continue to partner with families to address student access to mature content using our existing policies, processes, and procedures. So, for example, parents can work directly with our LMSs, our library media staff, at the school level to place notifications in Destiny, which is our library management system, in order to restrict the student's ability to check out library books that parents don't want them to have. That notification does follow students to other VBCPS schools should they transfer into another school. Parents can simply share an email that indicates the name of an author. They can identify a book title or category. We're currently working through a process to create a form that parents can complete to restrict student access. That way, if a student transfers to another school division, the receiving school division would have access to that information. Recent concerns have also provided us with an opportunity to make recommendations to adjust our policies. Policies 6-61 as well as 7-12 are being reviewed right now. Several regulations associated with those policies, as well as our processes to address selection of library materials, as well as student access to mature content in our libraries, are also being addressed. For example, Although we have structures in place to support families who want more control over student access to mature content, we are planning to increase parental awareness of those structures and options that we have in place to restrict or even challenge instructional or library materials. So the areas under consideration are, again, at the board level, consideration of some policy revision, and one of which you all a discussion later this evening, and policy 712. The administration or central support staff, we're reviewing regulations associated with those policies, and there are a total of 5 right now. And then the Department of Teaching and Learning, we're reviewing our processes associated with selection of, as well as access to those materials, as well as our library media specialist guide. So recently, we've had multiple challenges to books, and it began, I believe, back in October of this school year. And we certainly value the concerns of many families who have shared those concerns, as well as community members. And we're being very respectful of those concerns and just balancing the concerns against the First Amendment rights as those that are identified in the Supreme Court case, Island Trees School Division versus PICO. Currently, here are the processes that we have to address having access to mature content in instructional and library materials. Relative to library materials, parents, again, can have books flagged in our library management system, and they can also challenge text, which they do. We're also exploring other ways in which we can support parents who don't want their children to have access to certain library books. In the meantime, we have made the recommendations to policies 6-61 and 712, which speaks to how we consider instructional materials and how the public challenges controversial materials, respectively. We've also had and will continue to provide professional development to our staff on the selection of instructional and library materials. In fact, Dr. Shoebridge has met with her library media specialist twice face-to-face beginning in April and most recently last week, where she had a discussion about being familiar with the collections in the libraries, especially for those librarians who are new, and particularly with graphic novels. And as you know, a bill was passed that requires the Virginia Department of Education to develop a model policy by July 31st of this year in order to address sexually explicit content in instructional materials. The model policy will provide us with information, guidance, procedures, and standards to provide our parents with notification and identification of mature content of instructional material, parental review of instructional materials, as well as ensuring alternatives are provided for students if parents should request them. The bill also indicates that school division policies must be consistent and that the provisions of the bill should not be reviewed as requiring or providing for the censoring of books in our schools. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions, and I do have Dr. Shoebridge, who is the Director of Instructional Technology and oversees our Library Media Specialist program.
Okay, we'll start with Mrs. Franklin, and thank you, Dr. Rogers.
Certainly.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. A quick question. So, for example, how many new books typically will arrive at the beginning of the school year or for each school? I mean, just is there a standard number?
So I believe we but the bulk of the orders are done in March. And
Okay.
on average, I'll just give you an example. At the high school level, high schools could receive anywhere from 600 to 800 new
Wow.
titles annually, and they come. I'm not sure if they come all at once or they come sporadically, but they onboard 600 to 800 titles, and they also weed out just as many.
Okay. So I was just trying to think, because I was thinking, quite frankly, it was more like 20. But so with 600 to 800, I'm thinking that's not quite as plausible, my idea. But is there a way for, let's just say that Lansdowne High School, for example, they get these books. Is there a way for us, and I mean, be perfectly honest, to supply the list of new books that are coming into the school so that parents will have access to just be able to say, okay, these are the books in the school, and so that we might be able to coordinate a little bit better what they might not feel as comfortable with?
So listening to titles, I'm pretty sure that can be done because we have to order them. So
Sure.
we can certainly talk about how that might work per school. I know each school has an individual list, so we just have to navigate and coordinate that with.
Well,
our
I'm just
LMSs.
thinking if you
Yes.
put it on the school site,
Sure.
perhaps, have a little link for them to be able to look at the new books
new
that are coming
titles.
in.
Sure.
Just to give, more transparency to each school to know what is in there.
Of course.
Okay, so do you think that might be plausible?
Yeah, we'll talk about how to make that work easy
Okay.
for our schools. We may be able to do that centrally.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Weems and then Ms. Owens.
All right, so you said the library media specialists review the books annually. Is that what I
They
heard?
go through that collection.
Okay, so.
Well, not the entire collection, but they look for books that are out of date. They look for books that are tattered or torn to determine what they order again. They also look to see if any changes in the titles for books that may be no longer applicable to the genre that it's in.
But it's each LMS at his or her school,
Correct.
that they are just responsible for their building, their library. So if books are in certain libraries, and they've been in there for 2 or 3 years, that might, and even though they are deemed inappropriate at a later date or a later time, that might not flag that library media specialist to even look at that particular book.
So they create 5-year plans, and that's part of the weeding process. So a library media specialist will look to see whether, what the circulation is for a specific book. So if a book has not been checked out by students in 3 years, they place those on a weed list, and they will remove them. So for example, I know Bayside, one of the titles was pulled because it had not been circulated, and it was pulled prior to, was brought to our attention to be placed on a weed list
Okay,
to make additional room for newer books.
Okay, and so it's basically site-based, because what one school will deem appropriate, another school may deem that it's not appropriate. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, not necessarily. I think at the levels that may hold true. So, for example, with the Junior Library Guild, because it's a subscription base, if students have an interest of dystopian fiction, is probably one of the more popular genres amongst our young adults right now. And a middle school may have a subscription to the Library Guild, and they get these books that are sent to them, and they may determine, the library media specialist may determine that this is probably not appropriate for my middle school students, but it may be appropriate for high school students, so they'll move those out. So it depends on the school and what the applicability is in terms of the level.
Okay, so is there any, but I mean, even some of the books on, let's say the 6 books, they were in some of our libraries and they were not in some.
Right.
So to me, it seems site-based. Has there been any thought to make it more consistent?
In terms of having books, well,
Yeah.
I think part of the power of being able to attract students to a library is to attract or bring in books that students have interest in reading. And I think those interests at different schools are just different. We serve different populations. So what may be of interest, so I'll give you an example. Students at a particular school may have an interest in urban stories that talk about things that they deal with or that they see in their areas and neighborhood, i.e., I'll just kind of throw out gangs. They may have an interest in reading books around things that they have to see and witness. That's not a great example, but it is one. I'm thinking of a book in particular that deals with situations like that young adults deal with. That may not necessarily hold true at another school or a genre from a particular author that writes about specific instances that students can identify with. So the beauty of being able to have some autonomy at the site is to have conversations with students about what interests them. Hunger Games is another series that could be used. When that series first came out, all students weren't interested in that genre or of fiction, but there were other students that were. So I think the manner in which libraries select choice books for students is a lot different than it used to be many years ago, because we do ask and get input from not only students but from teachers as well.
Okay, that's all I have right now. I may have some questions later about
Sure.
the Mackin and the Junior Library Guild, but I'll yield to my colleagues for right now. Thank you.
Of course.
All right, Ms. Owens.
Thank you. I have a couple of mainly process type questions. In our district, if there's a book that a student has an interest in that's not available at their home library, are they able to request that it come from another school library so that they're able to access things that maybe aren't at their library?
So yes, we do have an interlibrary loan agreement.
Okay. I think it's excellent that we're looking for ways to implement parents' restrictions on access for their specific children so that they're able to make decisions about what fits their children's maturity level and their family values, so that particularly since we can access books from all across our district, that those parents are able to have that level of involvement without restricting what might be appropriate or a good fit for another student. So I'm very happy to hear that. I wanted to ask about the sources of books. I know that you mentioned the Mackin and the Junior Library Guild. Are there other ways that books can come into our libraries? For instance, you know, we have somebody make a donation to the school. Pharrell brings 100 copies of Happy to a school, and they either go home with students or they go in the library. Are there other ways that books come in, and is there a process that kind of triggers whatever same vetting process for that?
So yes, we do get books donated, and we subject those books that are donated to the same processes that we do with those that come from Mackin as well as Junior Library Guild. So yes, we do.
Okay. And then I guess just one more for now, and then I'll yield to my colleagues. You mentioned that there have been 2 meetings with all the LMS staff recently.
Face to face, right?
Face to face,
Yeah,
right.
we meet monthly. Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Do you know if there's been any, I guess, feedback from those LMS staff about guidance or things that they are looking for assistance or support from at a board level, so that we're getting that information if they feel like they have what they need to make decisions and do their roles, or if there's anything that would help, because we don't necessarily get a lot of feedback from that population.
And before I ask Dr. Schubert to come in and blend some of the feedback that she's received from LMSs in the last couple of meetings, what I will share is that the LMSs are highly trained, highly skilled, highly educated staff, and book ordering is but a small part of their role in the bigger context when you look at elementary, middle, and high school. In terms of providing coaching, support to teachers and partnering with them in designing lessons and activities, and honestly teaching kids how to read is an integral part of their role. So I think that needs to be the message that I'm speaking on behalf of the library media specialists, that the board understands, is that their role is huge in helping to teach students how to read and helping to support teachers with the resources to teach kids how to read and have a love of reading. So I'm not sure whether, Dr. Schubert, you want to share anything else regarding that? Not at all.
So I understand your question to be, what can the board do to support the library media specialists? Support the library media specialists. That's really what they need. That what they're doing in their buildings is for an entire population of students. They're supporting every child in that building. A classroom teacher might have 25 or 150 students, and that's who they focus on. An LMS in the building is there for every student, every family member, every community member, to provide a wealth of resources. They don't just, as Dr. Rogers shared, they don't just buy materials. There's the collaborator, the instructional leader, digital citizenship, how to do research, triangulating data. There's so many things. I think our library media specialists would be happy to know that they have your support, that's really what they need right now. And if I may, I don't want to go backwards, but Ms. Weems, I just wanted to clarify something from Dr. Rogers' answers. If a book comes up, to your point about consistency, if a book comes up that we say this is no longer age appropriate, we notify all library media specialists. So there's consistency in that way. Not necessarily consistency in what they might purchase to meet the needs of their population, but if we deem, a parent has a concern, we all look at it, administrators look at it, LMSs look at it, we get feedback, and we decide it's no longer age appropriate, we notify all of the schools to remove it from their collection for students. So I just wanted to clarify that piece. Thank you for the moment.
Thank you. And I think it was helpful to hear the vast spread of what LMSs do in our schools and how big that really is. That even their purchasing, which is a fraction of their job, we're talking 600 plus books that they're managing, and that's a fraction of what they do. And so I think it is important that they know that they are supported and appreciated. They're not a population that we talked about a lot during COVID and lately, but they have a very important role. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Hughes and then Mrs. Manning.
Okay. Yeah, a few things. We have people come up here say, and they'll say, well, I'm just a mom, I'm just a dad. But actually, those are the most important jobs they are and the final word on any decision with their child. And I would hope that everybody would acknowledge that. I think most people up here do. I think everybody up here is a parent. So in that spirit, and kind of piggybacking on one of Ms. Franklin's questions, when we have a list of books that these books are going to be ordered or being considered to be ordered, why not put that list out so parents can look at them and give input before an order is made? That could actually save some of the challenges kind of on the back end if we're looking at community standards on the front end. As far as a policy for challenged books, this is one of the things we were waiting for today. We had a policy come before a policy review committee, and one of the options that was discussed is that the items in our libraries should reflect community standards. So you have 11 pretty diverse board members, which should also reflect community standards. And if we have a challenge, perhaps each board member should choose a person from the community, a Virginia Beach citizen, to be on a committee to look at it. And it could be a staff member, it could be a librarian, it could be a student, a parent, anybody, as long as it's a Virginia Beach resident, so that decisions would reflect community standards. And it also puts the accountability on the people who are actually directly accountable to the public, which would make a lot more sense, and I'm quite sure take a lot of heat off administration, which you would probably really appreciate. And the last point I would like to make is reading levels were mentioned, or reading. We want children to be interested in reading. I was a voracious reader as a child, and none of these kinds of books were in school. And I'm looking at books becoming more and more graphic, but reading levels are a lot lower than they were many, many years ago. So I'm not sure that all the graphic novels are helping to develop an interest in reading. Otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing an inverse relationship.
Okay, Mrs. Manning and then Mrs. Felton.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rogers. So you mentioned that the library materials are ordered and vetted through 2 organizations. And I have some concerns if those are the organizations vetting the books. For example, genderqueer that this board just deemed obscene. Apparently that came through some sort of vetting process. A book that I'm now challenging, which is, in my opinion, more obscene than genderqueer, is the Saga series. I was just made aware of another very pornographic novel that's in some of our schools again today. So I keep finding about more and more of these very explicit, graphic pornography, oral sex being described in detail, masturbation,
rape in detail of what is being done to the person. And it's just awful, awful. And if these are the companies that we're using to vet these materials, maybe we shouldn't be using these companies anymore, or maybe we should have another process to make sure that those materials don't come in. Last fall, when I found out about genderqueer being in our schools, I asked Dr. Spence and this board if we could please make sure that we don't have any other pornographic materials and obscene materials like this. And I was told we can't do that. And so how are we going forward? How are we going to make sure that books like Genderqueer and the Saga series, which show in graphic detail the things that I mentioned, how are we going to make sure that those aren't given to minors going forward from here on out?
So, Mrs. Manning, I appreciate your passion around it, and you know, you get no argument from us here. And what I will share with you is our processes work. We have policies that address very much what you've shared. We have regulations that address very much what you've shared. We have processes and procedures that align with the regulation and the policies that are in alignment with what you shared. So none of our LMSs are certainly intentionally placing pieces of literature in the hands of children that are not appropriate. Relative to Mackin, Mackin is a service or a resource that curates titles. They're not given approval to say, this book is what you need for your students. That's up to us to determine based on our policies and our regulations and our processes and procedures to make sure that we are adhering to what we say we're going to do. So to your point, I think, you know, through all of this, it's a lesson learned, not a bad lesson, but I think it gives us pause for consideration as Mrs. Hughes said, some of the books that we have access to today, we didn't have when we were children. I mean, I was a voracious reader as well. I remember reading Judy Blume, coming of age books. And my mother didn't know I was reading that. She would probably be mortified if she knew some of the stuff that was in there. But at that time, I enjoyed it. So I think, you know, as we look at our policies and what that means in terms of practice and how we actualize what are in those what's in those policies, and we continue to have conversations with the professionals who are charged with soliciting input from our students and from our staff to see what is and what is not appropriate. And you know, it's a challenge to determine for me, you know, what I value in comparison to what someone else values in terms of readership. So it gives pause for consideration of having discussion about what is and what is not age appropriate. And balancing the what is and what is not appropriate with students' First Amendment. And it's an interesting juxtaposition, but I think as we look at the policies that we have, and I feel really good about the direction that we're going in to address this, because it's not going to go away. I'm just being honest, it's not. We're going to continue to find resources that we have question about just because of the diversity that we have in our school division. And I think it's our role as leaders to make sure that we have systems and practices in place, and it does start with our policies that we can adhere to. You know, as was shared, you know, we're looking forward to getting additional guidance from the Virginia Department of Education, which I think our guidance and things that we have in place will probably exceed the guidance that the state has relative to making sure that school divisions are partnering with parents. I'm a parent myself. I want to know what my kids are reading. Absolutely. You get no argument here. And I also think that we have to continually have discussions about balance, about how do you navigate the concerns of a few and apply it to everybody else and have a level of balance.
Well, I think providing pornography to children, I don't think that's just a concern of a few. And I mean, when I challenged the book Genderqueer, your department said it's okay and it's fit for students and it should stay in our libraries. It wasn't until I brought it to the school board that got overturned. So my confidence that the pornography is not going to continue to be given to our children, because I just saw on social media yesterday an LMS advocating for one of these pornographic books to be given to the students. I'll be sharing that with you when I get a chance. But I just, I've asked over and over again, let's make sure our kids, these books are not getting into the hands of our kids. And I'm finding out more and more every day. And this shouldn't be something that we just wait for parents to bring to us. We should be proactive in making sure that our LMSs are not ordering them, that we go through the list of books and find out. If I'm able to find them, I think that our administration should be able to find them. And so the next question I have is, you mentioned that partnering with parents, which you know, I love that, and helping families place notifications in Destiny to restrict student ability to check out materials. I've had students in our division for many, many years. As a parent, as a school board member, I have no idea. I didn't know, no idea we could do that, and I have no idea how to do that. So if I don't know, I guarantee you the majority of the public doesn't know. So how do we do that?
So I mentioned that in this slide, the second bullet, to increase parental awareness of existing options. And part of that is conversations and having discussion about what is and what is not available. So for example, at open house, when families come in through open house, putting information on websites. And
So
being
in
more
Destiny,
proactive.
can a parent go in and restrict the content that their
They
child's
can't
checking
go in
out?
Destiny, they can work with the library media specialist, and it's a simple email, is that correct?
Okay,
Dr.
so,
Schubert?
but you said place notifications in Destiny. Is that, how does that work?
So the library media specialist would do that. You wanna-
Okay.
So always, in our handbook, we have notification for LMSs that if a parent came in and said, for example, I don't want my child to read Hunger Games, the LMS was always able to put a note in Destiny. If it's in Destiny, it follows the student if they stay in Virginia Beach City Public Schools. If the child moves to another school and thinks, oh, I'm gonna go check out Hunger Games because this librarian doesn't know, it's in Destiny, and it's just been there. To your point, it's not been public. We haven't said, hey, parents, here's where the form is. In our last library media specialist meeting with high schools, we started to talk about how to develop a form, what should be on that form, so that it's available for a parent. They could go to the school's website, under forms, they could find that. So that's something that we're working on right now, is to make it much more visible for a parent to be able to express a limitation they would like to place. A parent can't go in and do it themselves. It's something that's done on the administrative side. So the LMS is happy to do that for any parent who has a concern about a title. We also felt the form was important if and the student leaves. So if a student goes to another district, how does that district know that this parent has this request? We don't want to lose track of that. And so we felt the form also then can be put in the queue for the student to be followed. So we are aware that it's not, we want these things to be a click and there it is. That's what I'm looking for, not buried where people have to ask permission to get that form. So we're working on that right now.
So I think it would be better if we, parents have so much going on, and honestly, as a parent, it's hard to navigate. Okay, I've got a problem at the school. Who do I call? Where's their number? I mean, it's hard, and you don't know what you don't know. As a parent, I had no idea that my child had access to a pornographic book in the library, and he did. And so how is a parent to know, are they all supposed to, hey, can you make sure my kid's not getting pornography at school? I don't think a parent should have to ask for that because they shouldn't be given it anyway. So
Mrs. Weems, I totally understand what you're saying. And, you know, I stood up in front of the library media specialist and I shared that really for me, there's sort of this polarity management of values. So I'm discouraged about genderqueer because I would be okay if my 15 or 17-year-old read genderqueer if they were looking for that to be seen. If they were looking to be seen and they were looking for something. I don't consider that pornographic as a parent. But the other book that came forward, we immediately said this is not age appropriate. And we are happy to say that books that are not age appropriate. But I will not stand here and say that we have pornography in our libraries. So I just want to be clear about that. So I
well,
understand.
I
understand.
appreciate your view, but I believe it is pornography when you're
And-
showing pictures of people giving oral sex to one another.
And-
And I think that meets the definition of obscenity in our law as well, although I know that there's an exclusion for schools, and hopefully we can get that fixed one day. So,
And Mrs. Manning, I totally appreciate your side as well, but that's where we don't really have a right or wrong. It's values, and it's about what's available for students to be seen and heard and recognized. And our LMSs work really hard to make sure the students that they support and service are there, someplace in that library to be seen, to be heard, to be known that they're loved. My library media specialist sees me and knows what I need, and that's available. But as a parent, if there's something I don't want my child to read, I know, and again, I understand I'm in a different position that I know this, but how do we make sure parents know that they can reach out to the LMS and say, I would like my child not to be able to check out this book, this title, this author?
Yeah, but like I said, as a parent, I didn't even know those books existed in our schools. So I think that that's the problem that we have here. Most parents in our division probably have no idea the graphic nature of the books that are in our libraries. And I think that that's the biggest problem right now. So even if there is a process to opt out, parents might not even know they need to opt out because they don't know it's there. So, and then just one last question for Dr. Rogers. I think you mentioned that you're making changes or have made changes to regulations regarding the regulations on instructional and library materials.
So we've not made any changes. We are
Okay.
discussing recommended changes, and those are highly dependent upon adjustments that are made to policy. So we won't make any
Okay,
changes.
so is that going to
until
go through, are the regulations going to go through the policy
We
committee? or
will
y'all-
share those
Okay.
forward before anything is done.
So just for clarification, the board governs through policy,
I know, yeah.
and administration sets the regulations.
I
to
understand,
support-
yeah, but the policy committee can determine, can guide and direct what those, what's allowed to be created in the regulations.
Regulations are under the purview of administration.
Right,
As long as they align to the guidance from the policies.
right, but they can set pretty strict guidance in the policy if they want.
They can.
Right, that's what I meant, yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, we're continuing with first round speakers, and then we'll do a time check, because I know some are in the queue now for follow-up comments, but we do have 4 other presentations, so we'll just see how this goes. Mrs. Felton.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Robinson and Ms. Schubert, thank you for this presentation. Couple of questions about the librarians and what they do. And I'd just like to say I offer up my generosity to them for being professionals, because it takes sometimes 2 to 4 years for an individual to become a librarian. And as of right now, we don't have a librarian school in this state. They have to either go to Washington, Florida, or Tennessee. And a lot of that is done online. And I'd just like to say that I appreciate their professionalism. I do know that in 1939, a Bill of Rights for librarian was put together. And I know you're speaking with your LMS. So in 1939, that Bill of Rights was put together as almost as an oath for librarians. Doctors have oaths, lawyers, nurses, and so do our librarians. So I'm reaching out and asking, what other support are you giving them as well? Because to them, the library Bill of Rights and the freedom to read are like oath to those individuals. And I'm looking for support from them as well. I hear all that is being said, and I genuinely always value family engagement and their input. And since the conversation about books has come up, I've been talked with a lot of parents, and I've also talked with a lot of librarians and their feelings on what they're having to do and being forced to go against their oath and what they are about. Because when they chose to take the profession, they embedded everything about a librarian, especially about the freedom to read. You said it well in your last statement. But as you're doing your policies and as we're moving forward, and I just like to say the Bill of Rights was established in 1939, but the last time it was updated was January 29th, 2019. So what support are you giving, are we giving to our librarians in staying in firm recommendation of their oath as librarians and writing these policies?
So in our library media specialist meetings, we talk a lot about, they have my support and that they need to recognize the students that are in their community and that they need to make sure that they're ensuring the books that are in their libraries represent the students in their communities. We had an interesting situation occur with COVID, a lot of, if you remember back in March of 2020, a lot of our library media specialists immediately sent books home with kids. So on that Friday, when we said we're closing schools, most of our libraries had 0 books. Like people just, we wanted kids to go home with resources. Some of those didn't make it back. And so we had an opportunity to refresh a lot of the things in our library to make sure, again, it's aligned to the population of students. I know, for example, when I was the principal at Kingston, our population changed over the course of my 6 years there. The library media specialist weeded out books that were no longer aligned or matched and ensured that what they purchased, what she purchased, matched the population of students and what parents were asking for and looking for. The best that we can do, my team and I, is make sure that they feel supported and that they know that we're there for them. And when things come up and when questions come up, just talk them through. Again, we want the opportunity to talk with our parents. So if a parent has a question or a concern, we want them to come to us so we can support them and address that. It doesn't, it's not personal in that you're coming at me as the LMS. It's personal that you as a parent want to put a protection on your student. And so how do we help support that and make sure that they have access to that?
Thank you for that. And as a former librarian assistant at Old Dominion University, it is a lot of logistics that goes with books and how they're coming in, especially when you're dealing with a publisher. And every now and then, a publisher will send you a bulk of books. And in that bulk of books is something that they want to push, that they want to advocate for. So they send that to you and make sure you get it into your library. And yes, and even at our library, we had individuals that come in and say, I want to donate these books to Old Dominion Library. And with that donation of maybe $500,000 sometimes, I want you to place these books on your shelves. So we had to put those in special reading groups as well. There is a lot of logistics of being a librarian and how you handle it. And I just want the public to know that librarians are professionals as well. And I think they hold genuine to what they've gone to school for to be. And they can do their job subsequently to what we're asking. So I hope that when we're moving forward and creating policy, that the librarians, with their professional background of 4 years of going to school, is considered in these matters as we move forward. I do appreciate all that you've done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Mrs. Anderson and Mrs. Melnick.
Thank you. I just have a question that has been asked of me, and I couldn't answer it for sure, but I thought I'd ask it now. Does Macon or the Junior Library Guild, do they provide like a summary, a small summary of maybe what the book is about, or even if it does contain mature language, does it let librarians know that ahead of time when they're ordering books? I'd just like to know how that is handled, and is there any type of a small summary or anything like that when they look at ordering books?
So I'll let Dr. Schubert answer that in a minute, but what I will share relative to a couple of the titles that have been brought to our attention, I did research and try to look and see what were the reviews saying. So librarians they consult multiple sources, and even if Mackin did, that's one source. And even though they have professionals on staff to do that, I think you're going to get a mixed bag. And again, I think it attributes to, value. So we have to, again, have balance in terms of looking at what the reviews say and then what we deem is appropriate for our students. So you want to share a little bit more?
Sure. So with Junior Library Guild, the library media specialist sort of completes a survey. What are the topics that your students are interested in your library? And so it could be, dystopian society and, science fiction. And so in that case, and then they just get like a monthly box of books. So it's not really looking at a summary. The library media specialist at that point might look at the book and say, these don't fit my student population, and send them back.
They can send back books?
Yes, with the Junior Library Guild, because it's sort of like subscription based. Think about Stitch Fix. You get a box and they look really cool, but then you send half it back because it doesn't fit. So, think about it like that.
Okay.
With the Mackin, there are summaries. The dilemma with the summaries, and I'm sure any of you could go on Amazon, you could go on Barnes & Noble, the summaries don't always give as much information as we think we need about a book. And so we might read it and say, oh, it's a Star Wars saga continuation and it sounds like it's a really good book, and then it comes in and it's not age appropriate. So in that way, it's, sort of to everybody's point, is ensuring when they come in, how are we ensuring that when they get them, that they're actually what should be put on our shelves?
Right, okay, thank you for that.
All right, we're going to skip to Ms. Owens and Mrs. Hughes, then swing back to Mrs. Melnick.
Okay, and I'll make it very brief. Two points. I want to, and I feel like it was clarified, Dr. Shoebridge clarified, that I don't want parents to feel children are coming into the libraries and accessing pornography. I think there is a difference between material that may have a more mature viewing developmental level, like a rated R movie. Parents may choose to allow their children to watch a movie that is rated R if the content fits what they feel is fine for their household. And it may have a naked person, a sex scene in it, doesn't make it pornography. There is a difference there, and I think that that's an important distinction. It still may be inappropriate for some families and some children and some parents, and so I respect that and the need for us to try and have parameters around that, but I think it's important that we also are speaking accurately about what parents and children may encounter in our schools. The other thing that I'm hoping that we'll continue to get more information and guidance around is as we're preparing for more challenges and continuing to build this process out, that the school board committee that's going to perhaps do those reviews has I guess the same information, that we're looking at the same information, that we're looking at the same standards, that whatever standards are given to our school board committee is what the LMS staff is aware of, and vice versa. There is a level of expertise, obviously, with LMSs, and to have an LMS present, at least at some point during the board's deliberations, just to ask questions and get that feedback from somebody who has expertise in that subject. The same way when the board has a committee to deal with COVID stuff, we have an expertise, somebody who's going to bring medical expertise, and we're still going to deliberate and make a final decision. I think that that's important, and that as we continue to develop this process out, that we will have those things included and clarified.
Mrs. Hughes.
So one thing that could maybe head some of this off is, I'm sure there's a list of titles available in schools. Just make that list available to parents, and they can go through and look at it if they would like.
Currently, any parent can go onto their student's school website and access Destiny. They can't search, like they can't type in Hunger Games and see what comes up, but they have access to being able to see every book that's in their student's library.
So if they have some free time, they can go through a list of thousands and thousands of titles, but they can't type anything in.
That's just the way the Destiny is set up.
And I also would take issue with saying none of this stuff is pornography. I look at, there was one graphic novel that had a young lady in her school uniform and her hands were bound behind her back and she was performing fellatio. I find it very difficult that experts in anything think that parents should have to tell you not to give that to a child. I think it's very clear that no child needs to be given that. And I do love the analogy about the rated R movies, but the difference is, if I want to take my child to a rated R movie, I do that. You're not taking my child to R movies until I tell you it's not okay. I'm the one who makes that affirmative decision to do that. And the same should be happening with these books. These children will be giving books with some graphic sexual pictures until a parent does enough detective work to find the book and tell you it's not okay. So frequently it's going to be after the fact. Nobody should have to tell you it's not okay to give children pictures of bondage and oral sex in school. That doesn't help them read. That helps other people, but it doesn't help them read. And we talk a lot about children's rights, and children do have rights, but children and adults are not peers. Children are safe when adults are making decisions for them that are in the best interest of their well-being. They are not peers. You ask any, kid who's going through puberty if they want to see pictures like this, a lot of them do. That doesn't mean it's good for them. If you ask them if they want to have cake for lunch every day, little kids are going to say yes. It doesn't mean it's good for them. Children and adults are not peers. We have to be making better decisions than this.
All right, we're going to end with Mrs. Riggs and Mrs. Melnick.
Mine's real short. I just wanted to agree with what Mrs. Owens just said about if there's any more reviews from school boards, that type of thing, in the coming days, coming months, years on these books. I think it's really incumbent upon us to have the librarians in there and the LMS specialist to hear their point of view. It would have been very helpful with this last one to hear a little bit more. I thought we did pretty well with getting the information that we got, but it would have been very helpful to have had that too. And also listening to what our retired librarian here, Mrs. Felton, shared. It's important to know those things as well. So thank you. And thank you both, ladies.
Dr. Shoebridge, everything you said was important. Everything you said was important. We have sitting school board members and a delegate who have demanded the names of our library media specialists. And that can't ever happen. We don't misuse media, our social media that way. We don't treat our employees that way. There are ways to get through this. People have differing opinions. And what you said, your interpretation, their interpretation, this battle could go on forever. It will never end. Thank you for finding ways to fix what needs to be fixed and to not fix what doesn't need to be fixed. But what I won't let happen while I'm sitting right here is to allow our employees to be mishandled on social media. And the comments I have read are abhorrent. The fact that we have library media specialists calling us because they are afraid of this public and the anger that we have to see and hear and read. That is truly, truly the saddest part of this whole thing. We are adults and we can get through this. But doing that to our employees should not be allowed. And I'm not going to sit back and watch it.
Okay, so I will end with, just to say, I hope that this hour is an example, I think, of us as a school division, and that includes staff members and elected board officials and the community. We don't have our heads in the sand. We're looking to address this in a responsible manner, and it is going to take time. And we continue to be in touch. We'll have to continue to be in touch with all our peer groups, because this is nationwide. It's not just Virginia Beach, and we all have friends who are, in all 50 states, and just like here, represent a composite of everything that we're acknowledging here. So we're acknowledging it. We're looking. Staff is looking at policy and regulation. We're hearing from the community, from our staff, and this is an important first step.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
May I make one last comment? I think a pretty tall accusation was just made that sitting school board members have asked for names of LMSs. I'd like to know who that was. I don't want any accusations made that I've done that.
I'll send you your own email. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I'll do it right now.
So Dr. Rogers, again, thank you and everybody who shared comments today. So with that, we'll move on to our next presentation.
Thank you.
Item C, employee input survey results.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chairwoman Melnick, members of the school board, and Dr. Spence. I'm Dr. Allison Bach, a program evaluation specialist in the Office of Research and Evaluation. I'll be presenting a summary of the results from the 2021-2022 Employee Input Survey. This presentation will give a brief overview of the employee survey process and overall division level results. Patterns of survey results by employee group, years of experience, gender, and race ethnicity will also be summarized. The employee input process is one vehicle that the division uses for gathering feedback to support Policy 2-15, communication with staff. Specifically, the employee input process provides opportunities for staff to express ideas and make suggestions for continuous improvement in the division. Since 2007-2008, the method for collecting this data has been an online survey. The results are based on questions related to working conditions and benefits. Employees responded to items on 5-point agreement and satisfaction scales with a neutral option. 4 new working conditions items and 2 new benefits-related items were added this year and will be noted when appropriate. The anonymous survey is administered to all employees every other year. The online survey was administered in February and March this year, and each employee received the survey invitation via his or her VB Schools email that included a link to access the survey. A total of 5,378 employees responded to the survey, which was 52% of the total number of division staff who received the survey invitation. This percentage was slightly higher than the response rates from the previous 2 administrations, which ranged from 48% to 50%. The following slides present the overall agreement levels for the last 3 survey administrations. The dark blue bar displays survey results from the most recent administration in 2022. The other bars display the results from the prior 2 survey administrations. As a reminder, the 2020 survey was administered in January and February of 2020 prior to the pandemic. The chart on this slide displays the overall agreement levels for survey items regarding resources and information. Overall agreement levels for 2022 range from 67 to 82%. The agreement percentage regarding having quality resources to do their job well maintained the same from the prior survey administration, while there were slight decreases in agreement percentages with the other items shown on the slide. The chart on this slide presents the overall agreement levels for survey items related to working relationships at the school or work site. Overall agreement levels for 2022 range from 69 to 86%. The agreement percentage for individual differences being respected increased, while the agreement percentages for the remaining items either remain the same or decrease slightly from the prior survey administration. In addition, 75% of employees agreed with the new item that they feel a sense of belonging at their school or work site. The chart on this slide presents the overall agreement levels for survey items regarding professional development in the school division and the employee's role in supporting the strategic plan and educational equity. Overall agreement levels for 2022 range from 55 to 66%. There were decreases in the agreement percentages regarding professional development opportunities and the role in supporting the strategic plan being clear. As a reminder, professional development was suspended for the 2021-2022 school year to not add to teachers' responsibilities. The decrease in agreement about professional development may be viewed as a positive indication that staff have come to expect more professional development options to help them. In addition, the strategic plan was not publicized as aggressively as in the past due to other priorities. The decrease in agreement about the role in the strategic plan was primarily due to an increase in the percentages of employees who were neutral about the statement versus disagreement. In addition, from 55 to 61% of employees agreed with new items regarding support of leadership development, opportunities for advancement, and the role in supporting educational equity being clear. The chart on this slide presents the overall agreement levels for survey items related to opportunities within the division. Overall agreement levels for 2022 range from 60 to 81%. There were declines in the agreement percentages for all items. The decreases in agreement about opportunities to exercise leadership skills and being proud to work in VBCPS were primarily due to increases in the percentages of employees who were neutral about the statement versus disagreement. The next two slides present the satisfaction levels with various benefits. 55% of employees were satisfied with the overall benefit package and 26% were satisfied with salary compensation. Satisfaction percentages for other benefits range from 37 to 59%. There were decreases in satisfaction for all items. Decreases in satisfaction with benefits on this slide were primarily due to increases in the percentages of employees who were dissatisfied versus being neutral. In addition, 37% of respondents were satisfied with health plan premiums, which was a new item this year. Additional benefits-related survey results are shown on this slide. For 2022, satisfaction levels for these benefits range from 38 to 69%. There were decreases in satisfaction percentages for all items. Overall decreases in satisfaction with most benefits on this slide were primarily due to increases in the percentages of employees who were neutral versus being dissatisfied. In addition, 57% of employees were satisfied with savings and spending accounts, which was a new item this year. Survey data have also been analyzed by employee group, as well as staff reported years of experience, gender, and race ethnicity. A copy of the report by employee group as displayed on this slide has been provided. The handout shows agreement percentages by employee group category with color coding for agreement levels. There are 4 main employee categories. The employee categories are designated as instructional personnel in blue, administrative personnel in red, clerical staff in orange, and school division services or classified personnel in purple. Each category begins with the results for the overall employee group, followed by results for subgroups within each category. Cells highlighted green have agreement levels that range from 80 to 100%. Yellow highlights indicate agreement levels from 50 to 79%, and red highlights indicate agreement levels at or below 49%. Overall patterns by employee group showed that staff in the administrator employee group had higher agreement on items in all 5 areas, whereas staff in the school division services employee group had lower agreement on items in the resources and information, working relationships, and professional development categories. In particular, transportation staff had lower agreement on multiple items. In addition, staff in the instructional employee group had lower agreement on items in the benefits category, as well as helping new hires, opportunities for advancement, and being proud to work in VBCPS. Instructional staff also had the largest decrease in agreement percentage regarding being proud to work in VBCPS from the prior administration in comparison to the other employee groups. Patterns were also reviewed for items with high agreement across the 4 main employee groups. There were several items that had relatively high agreement levels across all groups as noted on the slide. These items focused on being encouraged to work as part of a team, being proud to work in their specific school or department, individual differences being respected, and having quality resources to do their job well. Patterns by years of experience showed that instructional and administrative staff with more years of experience had higher agreement on most items in all 5 areas. The pattern by years of experience was more mixed for staff in the clerical and school division services employee groups. Staff with fewer years of experience had lower agreement on items related to resources and information. Overall patterns by employee reported gender showed that male staff had higher agreement on items related to resources and information and working relationships. In addition, male staff in the administrative and school division services employee groups had higher agreement on items related to opportunities. Employees who indicated they preferred not to say their gender had lower agreement on items in all areas. Overall patterns by employee race ethnicity showed that instructional African American staff had higher agreement on items related to resources and information, professional development, opportunities, and benefits. In addition, African American staff in the clerical and school division services employee groups had higher agreement in the items related to resources and information and professional development. White staff had higher agreement on items related to working relationships. In addition, employees who indicated they preferred not to say their race and ethnicity had lower agreement on items in all areas. Next steps include senior staff and departments reviewing the data and identifying implications for their work. In addition, PIA and human resources staff will work in collaboration with other departments to prepare for presenting this information at the school board retreat as part of the staffing update. We're available at this time for any questions that you have.
So thank you for that. We'll start with Mrs. Melnick.
I'm sure everybody's going to have a lot to say, but I just a shout out to elementary principals. Look at that, 100%. I'm proud to work in my school. I mean, but all those numbers actually were pretty good. But that's nice to see. That's not a small number either. That's 55. So.
You did acknowledge that some of us will take more time to look through this, but this is an opportunity for any immediate questions or comments. Mrs. Manning.
Just a quick question. On this document, could we get a comparison of the previous years that you mentioned in the other document, for example, 2018, just so we have something to compare it to?
Yes, I will look into, providing that,
Because I think we've gotten these before.
Yeah.
So if we could just get the previous one. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, looks like we're set for now. And, oh, I'm sorry, didn't know what that meant.
Sorry, this is a quick one. I know, I'll do a big race. The response rate, I know that we have a number of the 5,000, whatever, out of the 10,000 and some change. Do we know if there is any significant breakdown in participation between the color categories? So like our instructional personnel versus our clerical having a significantly higher out of those?
Yes, I was just going to pull it up. I have it here.
If it's
Packet.
available, if not,
Yes.
an email is fine.
Yep, no, I have it here. So administrative personnel, 51%, clerical was 66%, instructional, 59%, and school division services was 25%. So it was lower.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Allison, can you repeat that one more
Yes,
time?
I'm sorry, I went fast.
That's okay.
Yep, administrative personnel, 51% response rate. Clerical personnel, 66% response rate. Instructional personnel, 59%. School division services was 25%.
Okay, last call for now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have Mr. Freeman to introduce our next topic and update on our school security officers.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So this is a follow-up, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. DiMartini in a second, but it's a follow-up to the brief that we gave you. It was an SRO update a little bit over a month ago. And during that time, we shared that there were SROs that were being relocated from their position in schools temporarily as we're in the warmer weather to help out with the force down at the beach. During the course of that, we shared a concept of potentially armoring former law enforcement in our school, and there was desire to us to go back and develop a more detailed plan to turn that concept into something that was actionable, and that's what we're here to do tonight. As a reminder, this was a specific action that is being taken to address one portion of an SRO's responsibilities in a school, and that was response time related to having a weapon. So that's what we're here to talk about tonight, is the mitigation. I know that there's been conversation on other things that are related to how we keep our schools safe. We have an entire layered prevention and mitigation strategy that comes largely, if you think in terms of the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations that were made and the annual updates that we give you every year. So those things are all still continuing and still ongoing. This is just addressing the one very specific need that when SROs are no longer in our buildings, as has happened 2 years in a row now, how do we mitigate that loss in response time for those SROs? And how do we do that safely and effectively? So just as a backdrop, and then Mr. DiMartini is going to come up and share the plan. So with that, Mr. DiMartini.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome, Mr. DiMartini.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the school board, Dr. Spence, special guests. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on our armed security proposal. We have renamed the selected employees who will be certified for this program to School Security Officers, or SSOs. On April 19th, I explained the police department situation regarding staffing shortages. And I shared the BBPD's plan to reassign several SROs prior to the end of the school year. And we know response time is critical during a crisis, and every second counts. Fortunately, the BBCPS employs numerous former law enforcement officers as security personnel. This provides the opportunity to develop an armed security officer program to enable rapid response even when school resource officers are not physically in our buildings. And as you know, both state code and current school board policy permits these staff members to carry firearms on our VBCPS properties. So following our April 19th meeting, we moved forward with the development of the program. The program allows for former law enforcement officers who are within 10 years of separation from their previous law enforcement agency to carry a firearm while working for the VBCPS. From our group of qualified volunteers, we vetted and selected appropriate personnel. Each chosen candidate also received a recommendation from their current principal. Although their previous training and experience will be of great value moving forward, we know the importance of ensuring that the SSOs receive appropriate training and maintain all necessary certifications. We have worked with the Human Resource Department and have placed these new positions, at step 12 on the Unified Pay Scale. Our police department partners have been all in with the assisting us to develop the program, and collaborating with the PD has assisted greatly with our decision-making process as it relates to equipment, procurement, the policy, and training. It will take some time to fill positions at all of our secondary schools. So for the first phase and for immediate implementation, we have selected and trained 5 candidates. The identified security assistants who meet the eligibility requirements for the program will initially be assigned to high schools without SROs for the remainder of the year. We placed an emphasis on ensuring there is no disruption to their current school assignment or school operations. We worked with the VBPD to acquire the equipment necessary to ensure the first SSOs are ready to be assigned. Expenditures were funded by the current school division services budget, and Safe School staff assisted the Virginia Beach Police Department's firearm training unit and taught other classes required by DCJS. Training included relevant law, policy, and written VBCPS expectations with significant emphasis on firearm safety, use of force, proper handling, and storage. Each SSO received a firearms refresher before they completed the mandated qualification course, and they must successfully pass the standard set by the BBPD. The certification threshold exceeds what is required by state code. SSOs also received the DCJS mandated training in emergency evacuation and threat assessment. The Office of Safe Schools is prepared to assign certified SSOs on Tuesday, May 31. SROs will be present at the high schools not staffed by our school security officers. Safe Schools will monitor the implementation of the program closely, working to ensure that the SSOs smoothly integrate into the existing school culture once assigned. Feedback and data will enable us to make adjustments to the program as needed, and future training for additional eligible security assistants will also be adjusted as needed in preparation for and prior to the upcoming school year. Before I turn it over for questions, I would like to recognize a member of my team who spent a lot of time and effort on this project, and it's retired Police Captain Ben Gons, who's sitting over here. This was made a whole lot easier with having his expertise and experience in our office. I appreciate the work he's done.
Okay, thank you, sir. We'll start with Mrs. Anderson.
So we've gotten a couple emails from people who have indicated that it seems that they think that we're training all security assistants across the city. So I just want to reiterate that you just told us you've only selected 5 who are highly qualified, who have met the requirements. We're not just choosing every single security assistant across the city. So, just reiterate that so that people understand that they have to be former law enforcement officers who have been retired less than 10 years. So I don't think we can emphasize that enough, because we've got some people who are out there spreading the word somehow that, that we're just going to have all these security assistants across the city. And that's really not what's happening. That's why you've only trained 5.
Yes, ma'am. I think it's very important that we're clear that we have over 200 assigned security assistants throughout our division, and it's a very small population of that group that meet this criteria that are allowed to even participate in a program like this.
Right. I just want people to really understand that, and we have to have that criteria set forth, because we obviously just wouldn't want guns to be given to just anybody, but we want people who are highly trained on this, so.
Yes, ma'am, and that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Mrs. Holtz.
Thank you very much. I don't believe that anybody disagrees that if we are taking police officers out of the schools, that we should replace them with someone in authority, someone who has the authority, to, in a situation that administrators can't handle, or teachers, because they have their other duties. The problem that I've been hearing, and from the letters that the board has gotten, is they object to arming these people because they are not police officers. And you mentioned that, and you mentioned it again tonight, that you were looking at a particular pool of people, but all of the research I've done tells me that because officers have guns in schools, even regular police officers, doesn't make a school safer. Look at the very recent supermarket shooting in Buffalo. There was an armed police officer, but the perpetrator had an AK-15 tire rifle. All of the poor officer is no longer with us. He didn't have a chance. Our police officers have a Glock. There's 2 types that they distribute. The police officer in Buffalo had a Glock. What good is that against an AR-15 style rifle? In most of these school shootings where there have been numerous killings, that's been the case. There are other things that officers can do, but I don't think having just arming somebody in a school, we already have enough guns in schools. I object to adding one more gun in a school that is not a regular police officer who has been, been on the force for a while and has had the force training. And actually, I don't think we need any guns in schools. The one serious attempt that we did have here in Virginia Beach, it's been over 10 years, was in which a student did make a threat. It wasn't a police officer who discovered it, it was the kids. It was the students that turned this boy in, and, that the law dealt with him. Police officers have stun guns, they have collapsible clubs, they have handcuffs. And I don't know any instance, I asked if any police officers in the last 10 years have ever had to use a gun in a school setting. I said unholster the gun, because I didn't know the good term for that, but I was told that there was no record of that. Well, I don't believe it. Well, I do believe it. You know why there's no record? Because it never happened. Because if it did happen, it'd be on the front page of Virginia Pilot. What I want to say is I don't think any more guns in school are necessary. If we have to replace the officers who have to leave, and right now we talk about 5, but in the future there'll be more than 5. I don't object to that, but I do object to them carrying a gun. That's it. Thank you.
So I heard the ultimate point of your objector, and so my response is not going to be related to that, because I appreciate your perspective on that. But what I will share is what I shared up front, is the security, the safety and security of our schools as it relates to these types of threats. It is a comprehensive planning effort that is needed for that. And that's all captured under the Blue Ribbon Panel updates that we provided for you every year since I've been here. So it's about 5 years since we had the Blue Ribbon Panel, and you've got an update every year. If you remember those, and we'll give you another one this year, and within those Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations, there's a mental health component that we have the right people who are addressing. So when you mentioned that, well, hey, it was the kids that discovered and they shared something, that's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for people that are close to a concern or an issue to be able to notice it, to have enough wherewithal to be able to understand what they just experienced, and to be able to share that with a qualified adult who can then look to provide resources and get the help that's needed for that individual. So that, I won't go into an entire Blue Ribbon Panel update with you here, but this one was very specifically designed to, and what you have here, and what the concept that you asked us to develop more detail on, is when SROs get moved out of our secondary schools, and there's one in all of our secondary schools, the response time, if something to occur on that site, is going to drastically increase. You can decrease that response time substantially by having a weapon on site. That comes with safety risks. So how do you mitigate that risk? And everything that Mr. DeMartini just described is how do we reduce the risk that's associated with having another weapon in the school? And by doing within what's the legal requirement, which is the right requirement, is somebody who has that type of background. You can't take somebody who doesn't have a law enforcement background and give them all those what I like to call reps. And what that means is experience. They have those repetitions, that experience where they have a judgment that has been built up over time, and they have a conscious, it's a great responsibility to have a weapon on your hip on a daily basis. And only those that do it understand what that responsibility is. So we are selecting people that already have that ingrained in them from their prior employment, and we're using them to be able to mitigate that risk as far as response time associated with SROs not being in our schools because they had to appropriately be moved to cover another city priority. So, well, all that being said, I just wanted to be able to share a couple of those things, but I respect what you said about your opinion related to an additional gun in the school.
Mrs. Manning, and then Ms. Owens.
Yeah, so just to clarify something, I think something was said that was not correct, that we're just arming just anybody. You have to be a retired law enforcement, correct?
Yes, ma'am. You have to
Okay.
be within 10 years of retired
Okay.
from a law
And is
enforcement.
that any law enforcement? Can it be federal, FBI?
Yes, it can
Okay.
be.
Great job on everything that you've done. I'm glad to see you said we've got 5 candidates that are going to be ready here soon. Do we have any others in the pipeline that we're trying to reach out and recruit?
Yes, ma'am. We have over 20 that meet the criteria that could qualify for this program. Could get a little complicated. Some of them are at the elementary school level or the middle school level, and we're trying to mitigate how we move them once they get certified with this. So we have to work with HR on those issues.
What about recruiting from people who aren't currently in our school system, who are retired law enforcement?
I think this is going to be an attractive piece to retirees who are looking for another job. And I think this is going to help us retain some of those folks.
And that could help our police department as well with their staffing issues.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Great job to you and your team. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Owens.
Okay, I have I guess a few questions. I was not, wasn't aware that it was moving forward to have the armed officers in the schools like immediately, but I asked last time about the mandated retirement for police officers, and somebody, I think, was going to look into that. If I just want to understand, when officers are mandated to retire, is that due to like an income slash making room level thing with officers, or is there something about that age of retirement that the city and law enforcement have decided is research-based for lowering efficacy? Why is there that mandate?
I think it's an individual choice. You have just like military retirements, teachers who retire, they decide that, it's time for them to go. They have other opportunities. They've been there long enough where they'll get their benefits and their retirement, and those types of things. So it's different for everyone. There's a mandatory retirement for law enforcement. I believe it's 65. I think it's 65. We don't have anyone that's in this program that's that old.
So as we're moving forward with this program, do we have any age guidelines? From what I'm hearing, they can be within 10 years of retirement, so technically we could have a 75-year-old armed officer.
We are selecting the folks who are going through this program, and then we have a qualification course that they have to go through. So what I didn't share earlier is we had 6 individuals that we trained for firearms. 1 did not pass, so we're down to 5. So this is a standard that we are holding them to. So if they don't show the proficiency that we're looking for, then they will not be a part of this program.
Okay. And I know that when we've had our SRO presentation to the board, one of the things that I think most of the people on the board were very proud of is that VBPD has a very specific partnership and SRO training program. The officers that we are looking at, in addition to being retired law enforcement, are they from VBPD, and were they previously a part of that training program?
So not all that are going to be certified with us will come from the Virginia Beach Police Department. We do have members of our security team who are from retired FBI, retired federal marshals, probation, things like that. That would meet the criteria that could get into this program. But they would also have to go through our hiring process and our qualification courses and our training, which would be provided by the Virginia Beach Police Department.
Okay. And so do you know if it's the equivalent of the SRO training?
So all SROs are police officers.
Correct.
They don't get specific firearm training for SROs. They get
Correct.
They get yearly training by the police department for their qualifications of carrying a firearm. It's not specific to SROs.
Correct. But the other training that's involving interactions with children?
So we, as far as,
Students.
well, they're working for us right now. These folks are working
Right.
for us right now as security assistants. So they get the Virginia Beach City Public Schools training that we provide security assistants. That doesn't change. It's still the same folks that are working for us now. We're just we're certifying them to carry a firearm.
Correct. But like the SRO program, I'm aware that they do like crisis intervention training, so they're getting additional training on mental health issues and other things that I'm not sure if that is included in our new worker security assistant training.
I think, Ms. Owens, that as a reminder, we're not trying to replace our SROs with these school security officers. That is not our intention. We're not, I think Mr. Freeman said this a couple of different ways. They do a wide range of things relative to community policing and crisis intervention and mental health support and a lot of other things that they are trained specifically to do as police officers. Our intention is not to train these school security assistants as police officers would be trained. Our intention with these school security officers is to continue to train them as school security assistants with the additional added layer of carrying a firearm to assist us in a first response should we have a significant safety event at the school.
In terms of any other, psychological testing or anything that goes along with regular law enforcement pieces, is that?
I can share with you all of our training that we provide our security assistants. And that's through DCJS standards and security from our risk management team, or training from risk management team, and what everything that our security assistants get as training, I can share with you. The added piece of certifying them to carry a firearm does not get them additional training along the lines of what you just mentioned.
Okay.
We could add it. It certainly wouldn't be.
So I think what you're addressing, so you asked basically, is somebody evaluating them? If they're having a hard time in their personal life and they're becoming at risk, do we have a way to catch that?
Correct. Currently, the SROs that are in our schools with weapons, we know that they have a certain level of additional training to, identify crisis stuff, to identify issues that they may have going on in their personal lives, all of those other pieces. When we're having somebody else armed in our school, I'm wondering how close of an equivalent do they have with these checks and balances?
Are you asking if we have people that are observing the SSO who is going to have a weapon and making sure that they are mentally capable of carrying out their duty? Or are you asking if the SSO is evaluating other people and seeing how they're doing in their life?
That they have somebody overseeing them in that way.
Okay. We have talked at every meeting about that safety component related to this. So again, these are former police officers or other law enforcement who they have to be evaluated by the police department as they go through their training. Often for those that we already have familiarity with because they were on the police department, that's easy. And it also requires the principal's approval. That's their supervisor. So the principals know that they have an individual that has a firearm with them and they're at greater level of risk and they need to be in the position to be able to understand that it is a natural thing that people can go through crises. They can have bad things happen in their life. And there are times, so as in my former position, we were responsible for when a member of our security team was having some sort of event that we deemed that they were not really fully ready to carry out their duties and responsibilities, we did what we called downloaded them. And what that means is they weren't going to have access to their weapon until we got them into the supports that they needed and we demonstrated that they were able to take that back on. We've had that conversation repeatedly with the group of being able to determine and evaluate that over the course of time. And that's going to be a joint effort between the principal as their supervisor and Safe Schools, working with them to ensure that we have that level of insight into how our team is doing.
Okay, and last, question for now. As a division, are we purchasing and maintaining the weapons?
We're purchasing all the time.
So this has been a very small window of opportunity for us to get this program going. So we are working with the police department right now on how to acquire the weapons that we would provide for them. We are in the midst of getting a MOU signed. As I'm sure you're aware, MOUs sometimes go into the land of the lost. We have this one ready to go and on the desk of the chief being reviewed right now. And as soon as he signs off on it, we will be able to acquire our weapons and our ammunition from the police department. We are prepared and have another plan to go forward with. If this takes time, the retirees or the former law enforcement officers that we selected have their own weapons that were issued from their jurisdiction. They could carry those in the meantime until we get it ironed out with the police department. Either way, in my opinion, we're okay. They are issued firearms from the jurisdictions that fit into a highly retentive holster that we've ordered. So the safety is not an issue.
Okay, and you mentioned having a very small window. Is that because?
We started this process on April 19th,
Mhm.
and we're trying to get this implemented by next Tuesday. So we're trying to iron out with the PD on which weapons we should use. There is not, if you're familiar with weapons, there's not a significant difference between the weapons. They fit in the same holster. The weapons that the former law enforcement officers would use if they use their own fit in the same holster. It's designed to hold any weapon that we authorize our guys to choose at this point.
Right, but the small window of time for this Tuesday, is there a rush that we want to have we want to have our officers in by Tuesday versus the following Tuesday versus the end of the school year is about to be over?
Sure.
So you're using the term rush, and that rush implies that it's reckless and that we might miss steps as we are proceeding. What we're doing is we're expediting a process because we know that the SROs, we've already had a round of SROs that are not in our schools right now. And that will, that number will reduce as we proceed through the remainder of the school year. So we have a gap in response time that is concerning to us. We need to go through all the right processes to make sure that we get this program right. The most important thing that we can do as we proceed down this road, if you approve as a school board for us to do this, is to make sure that we do it right, we do it safely, we do it in collaboration with our local law enforcement, we get all the right training, we equip them properly, and we pick the right people. So you use the word rush, I wouldn't use a rush. We're expediting. And you can imagine the number of things that we want to make sure that we get right as we go into this. And Mr. DeMartini shared that we got your approval to develop a more comprehensive plan a month ago. It's a number of moving parts, and it's the reason why Mr. DeMartini was recognizing his team, and I'll recognize the police department. Everybody, this has been a substantial effort that everybody's contributed to. So there are still a number of things that we are looking to get aligned and correct before we implement this. Your question is why can't we wait longer? We're going to be shorter SROs. And do we want to take that gap? When I say do we want to, our recommendation is to not accept that gap to the school board, but that is a decision from the school board to direct staff on how you would like us to approach that. But we will be ready by next Tuesday to minimize that gap.
Okay, and so when you talk about by approval of the board, is there a plan for this to go on for a vote? Or, I mean, next Tuesday, it's already going to be in place, so.
No, ma'am, there has not been a plan for this to be approved by the board because this is administrative in nature. I think Mr. Freeman's comments are saying, if the board feels differently and you all feel you need to add it to an agenda and you need to address it, that's always your prerogative. But our understanding and our takeaway from previous conversations was that we were going to move forward. That's why we brought it to you then, and we had that conversation then and said our plan is to move forward, barring any different direction from the board. I mean, that's literally what we said. So we got told, no different direction from the board, so we're pressing forward. And again, it's always the school board's prerogative to come back and say, nope, we want to do something different about that. So that's really between you and your colleagues.
Ms. Owens, I do want to reassure you that these decisions that are being made by my office come with years and years and years of experience in this field. This is what we did for a living for a long time. The members of my office are all retired, well, not all of the members of my office, but the ones that worked on this project have spent years on the SWAT team, have spent years as snipers, have spent years as supervisors of police departments. So this is not something we're not familiar with or that we don't know and are not experts in.
And I don't, I don't doubt the expertise in weaponry. So I want that to be clear.
So if I may just add on to Dr. Spence, we did have, it was the April 5th workshop that you last stood before us with this plan, which I think the understanding was clear, and it's why I've responded the way I did to these recent emails, to reiterate what the plan is and what it is and what it isn't, and that there would be an update today. So just wanted to share that for what it's worth. Mrs. Weems.
Yes, thank you. So I just want to, try to clear a few things up that I've kind of heard up here on the dais, and it might be confusing to those watching, especially for the first time. We're not adding guns to the schools. If an SRO, like Officer DeMartini, if you're an SRO at one of our high schools and you get pulled because the city needs you, we are replacing you at that school so there's no gap. Is that correct? With a SO, we're not adding another gun because you're no longer there. Because you've been pulled to another duty.
That's correct.
Okay. So I just want to make sure, because it sounds like some of us are like, I don't want to add guns, I don't want to add guns. But our desired standard is to have an SRO who is armed at our secondary schools, and that is not happening because they are having to leave to do city work. Is
That's
that correct? So we want to make sure that we're filling that gap so that if a crisis comes, the response time is appropriate to help. Okay, just wanted to make sure that's correct.
So, yeah, so just to clarify,
Okay.
because I see where you're going with it, but I don't want to be disingenuous.
No, I
from-
don't
from
either,
what
but
we
that's
shared.
how I see it, so, yeah, please.
So, the only caveat that I'll make to that, if somebody wanted to quibble with the way that you just described that, is we're not going to wait for an SSO, or, I'm sorry, for an SRO to not be in the building to say, okay, you need to wear your weapon today. We are adding somebody so that when they do get removed, that we
Right.
have a replacement. But next year, when the SROs are back in full force in our schools, which the police department has assured us they will be, we're not going to tell the SSOs not to wear their weapon because there's an SRO in the school. They will still, it's good to have consistency for those individuals in how they perform their duties.
Okay, and then in that case, if an SRO from another school is sick for 3 days and there's not an SRO there, and maybe they don't have an SSO, but that SSO then could go fill that gap, correct?
So there's, the intention is to have one in all of our secondary schools.
Right.
So if that SRO is sick that day, there's an SSO that's in the building,
Okay.
ideally who's also not sick, who is ready to be able to respond.
Okay, good. Just want to kind of clarify
Yes,
that.
ma'am. So it's a backup
Right,
in that
right.
case.
Okay, now the police, or the chief says that he can guarantee that we're gonna be back to normal next year. So,
Guarantee is not the word.
okay, what did he say?
He intends.
He intends. Okay, so is this not gonna, because this is now 2 years and it kind of seems to be cyclical and annual, so is it gonna happen again, or what are you, what is your prediction for this?
So the brief background, last year, the police department approached and said they needed to reprioritize police officers down at the beach. Last year, I think the number that they reported of police officers they were short was 100, on the order of 100. This year, they're short on the order of 85. It's hard to see that they're going to make, that they're going to fill in 85 vacant officer positions prior to next year. So it's very possible. It's during the springtime increase in activity down at the beach that they're prioritizing their efforts. And I'd say prioritizing, it doesn't mean that there aren't important efforts to be able to cover elsewhere, but they need to cover that priority that's expected of them. So that summertime activity ends at the end of summer, coinciding with when we're back in school. So in our meetings, the chief has continually shared that he intends to have them back in school. The reason that I don't want to mince words here, but guarantee is just, it's too strong a word because anything can happen. If there was an event that was to occur somewhere else on the beach and they needed to reprioritize those officers, they would likely reprioritize those officers. But if the traditional cycle continues, he fully intends to have them back in to begin next school year.
Okay, but we need to be prepared for this, spring extra stuff happening like it has. Yeah.
This does give us that backup, that if
Exactly, that
anything
gives us
does
our
occur,
backup.
we're ready to
Exactly.
go and we've already done the work.
Right, very good. I like that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And real quick, Ms. Owens, also, the HR department and Ms. Woodhouse has made it perfectly clear that this program does not start until everything is signed off by them and Dr. Spence. It's not like Safe Schools gets to just say, hey, go ahead and start on Tuesday. There are checks and balances in place.
All right, Mrs. Franklin.
Just some comments that I have observed. It's just interesting because a lot of the feedback that we get is because, with the books, parents are concerned that we're harming the kids. And, we get feedback about having guns in school, and it's because we're concerned that we're harming our kids. But I just want, from my perspective, to say that we have got a lot of very capable, and you all have done a lot of research, have done a lot of work with the police department. I personally, I think I might be the only person up here who has ever actually worked security. And I can tell you that there is a lot of training that actually goes into carrying a firearm. And there has to be a certain amount of trust that we provide, just like we want to say that, our resource officers, our library media specialists are, they are trained. I heard a lot of comments about how trained they are, how much, education they get and everything that they go through. These SSOs and SROs are very trained and capable officers that are working on behalf of the schools to ensure that we do have a safe environment and we can be proactive in response times. So I just feel like, first of all, I just want to thank you and Mr. Freeman, Mr. DiMartini, and I'm sorry, I want to thank you as well, Mr. Gantz, and for all the work that has gone into this, because I do believe, and personally I can attest to the fact that things do escalate very quickly, and response time is very important when it comes to being able to de-escalate a situation. And so I just want to thank you for all your time and effort you've put into this, and I personally want to say that I support us doing this, because I feel like there is a certain amount of proficiency that we're looking for. I understand Ms. Owens' concerns to ensure that we have guidelines that we're meeting, and that they're, constantly being reinforced, because I do believe that skills do lessen over time. But I do believe that, we have to have some sort of trust that we are, providing these guidelines and creating a sense of safety in the schools as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So back to you, Ms. Owens.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Holtz mentioned a question about how often weapons are being unholstered, and I understand that that's not something that was being tracked and probably wouldn't have been, because that they are under law enforcement, they're under VBPD. That's not for us to track. But for these SSOs, do we have guidelines on what that would look like? And then additionally, with the holsters, the question about the holsters, I know, or my understanding is that they're currently investigating the holster issue at Centera, where somebody was able to get it from the officer. Are those the holsters that we're going to be using, and how confident are we in that situation?
No, we're not using the holsters that the officer had at the incident with recently. That holster is designed for a handgun with a light. Our school security officers will not have lights mounted on their handguns. So it's a different holster. Ours is a double retention holster. Believe it or not, the police department is entertaining going back to the holster that we've acquired. And just to mention earlier, Ms. Holt, you talked a little bit about response time. You brought it up. So in the safety and security world, we look at two different things: preventing a crisis and responding to a crisis. We have multiple layers that help us prevent crisis in the school systems. Responding to a crisis is very difficult. And if you're responding to a school shooting and you're not able to stop that, bad things happen. So we're talking about responding to a school shooting here.
Okay, so a final call on anybody else? All right, we thank you, gentlemen, and your team for being with us today.
Thank you.
Okay. So our final workshop presentation of the evening is Bayside Sixth Grade Campus, Jericho Road Briefing, and welcome again, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you. I'm going to tee up Ms. Ingram to come up here and talk a little bit about this one. So this property has been on our plate for a while, and there's been meetings with the public about what to do with it moving forward as we proceed. And so as you know, we have our standard CIP plan, and there's a PPA that's on the books. So it could be a ways out. It could be a little bit closer, just depending upon how things go. We figured now is a good time to be able to share some information and have an opportunity for discussion from the school board. So with that,
Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board, Dr. Spence. I'm here today to spend some time with you to discuss Bayside sixth grade campus on Jericho Road, which you can see on the slide above. This building has been used for a multitude of uses and currently houses the Bayside Middle School sixth grade students. Built in the year 1957, the 57,000 square foot building and 18.6 acre site along Jericho Road between Witch Duck Road and Independence Boulevard in the Aragona neighborhood has also been referred to as Old Aragona and is one of our older building assets. The building is adjacent to Pembroke Elementary School, as you can see, just west of the elementary school. Looking at Bayside Middle School attendance zone in the white on the map shown here, you can see the proximity of the schools in the area. Bayside Middle School is in the lower center of the attendance zone on Newtown Road, and Bayside sixth grade campus is east of the middle school along the attendance zone boundary. Bayside Middle School, which opened in 1970 as Bayside Junior High School along Newtown Road, just west of where Bayside sixth grade campus is. Beginning in the 2014-15 school year, a separate school for Bayside Middle School sixth graders, the Bayside sixth grade campus, was established. Bayside Middle School 7th and 8th graders continue to attend classes at Bayside Middle School. As you know, CIP 1-028 proposes a new school for these sixth grade students with the replacement of Williams Elementary School in either the year 2028 or earlier, depending on the process in which the building is delivered. As you are aware, we're going through the PPEA RFP process, and this replacement school could get built up to 3 years earlier, should that process be approved this summer and in the late spring of 2023. Site design for the new replacement building could begin as early as this fall or in several years. Both schools, Williams Elementary School and Bayside 6th, as part of the CIP 1-028, would be constructed on the Williams Elementary School site, which you can see on the slide above, which is just south of Bayside Middle School within the Tri-Campus Learning Circle. It is currently planned that both buildings will remain occupied during construction. When construction is complete, students from the Bayside sixth grade campus on Jericho Road would no longer need the old Aragona building. And we're back here to Bayside sixth grade campus on Jericho Road, and with students vacating the property just west of Pembroke Elementary School, the property would become excess. As you look at the existing site, please note the property line shown in orange. Straddling the property line is the Pembroke Elementary School Special Education Wing, built in 1988. In order to satisfy adequate room for the needs of Pembroke Elementary School, the property would need to be re-subdivided, moving the property line to the west and leaving a remaining 15 plus or minus acres as possible excess property. An appraisal for the property would also have to be conducted. Looking at current assessments, the land value is currently assessed at $1.5 million at the city. So as a recap, the possible disposition of property at Jericho Road will be discussed as we continue to work through the planning and construction of the replacement school for Williams Elementary School and Bayside 6. There's been some discussion about what to do with the property once it is vacated and declared excess. At this point in time, we're in the early stages of planning for the replacement school. Staff is recommending to continue planning for the disposal of Bayside 6th grade campus with the following steps: re-subdivide the property and get an updated appraisal of the property. With that, I welcome any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Ingram. So we'll start with Mrs. Anderson.
So it's been said here many times from some of the residents who live in the Aragona area that that property was gifted to VBCPS in 1957 by John Aragona with an agreement that if we ever disposed of the property. And so I think we need to also, as part of our recommendations, we should go back and look at that agreement that John Aragona had with BBCPS when he gifted that property for the school, because the people who live in that area, I think, are expecting to have some type of a city park put there. So, I mean, it's great that we would be able to sell the property, but I don't know who we'd sell it to. I sell it to the city. I'm not sure. but I think we need to keep that in mind, because those people who live in the Aragona area are expecting to get that, they're expecting us to go with the agreement that John Aragona had when he first gifted that property for a school to be built. It was called Aragona Elementary at the time. His legacy lives through that. So I just think that's something that we need to respect and that we need to, look into and find out if let's do what was expected of us. I think that's something that we need to do to show that when somebody does gift something to us, and with the agreement that someday, somewhere, it'll not be used anymore for a school, that we honor the agreement that was made back in 1957.
Thanks, Ms. Anderson. I've made a note to review that agreement as part of this process.
I taught at Aragona for a couple years when it was Aragona Elementary. So I was there when we closed the school, and I've heard that, about that agreement several times. Thank you.
So, and I'll share, because we got to have a meeting, this was about on the order of about a year ago, where that was a topic of conversation. Heard that comment multiple times. There's nothing that any of the real estate legal teams have found to indicate that there was an agreement like that existed. So that's not to say that it won't be uncovered at some point, but I can tell you that due diligence has been done and will continue to be done, and there's no indication, nobody can find where that actually existed. So just for you and for the general public, I understand that information is out there, but we have experts that have looked into it and will continue to look into it, and they have not found that to be the case.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mrs. Weems.
Well, yes, I'm glad you clarified that, because I was going to say that I'm not sure that was accurate, what Ms. Anderson was saying. Yeah, and I've been, pretty involved with this, being the Bayside rep, and I know we have Ms. Samko here. Thank you for joining us, the president of the Aragona Civic League. And this community has been and continues to fight for, like you said, and I don't know if expecting is the right word, but some sort of recreational park, ability park in that area, because it is so lacking to be having, about 4,000 houses there and no real playground. So my question is, how long is this going to take? Because I thought we had already met and we were doing this a few months ago when I had a phone conference with our attorney and you and Becky from the city. I thought that this property line was going to kind of be looked at. Is that what you've done, and that's what you're bringing us, that you looked at it and it's halfway there, so now you have to, like what's the next process and how long is it going to take? Because I know, we say, well, it's, it's so far away, but it's not really far away when you think that you could move it closer by 3 years. And we want to give this community some assurance that we've done our due diligence and figure out what's going on, because this community has been fighting for this for years and years and years. And so what's the timeline here so that we can kind of all be on the same page?
Yes, thanks, Ms. Weems. So if the PPEA process goes forward, we're looking at public input in the next year, up until spring 2023, when we look at the PPEA comprehensive agreement. So we will have adequate public input. If the PPA process does not go forward, we're looking about 3 years from now, roughly, for when Williams Elementary School, Bayside 6th, would get some public input as well. I'm not familiar with the meeting that you were mentioning. It might have been my predecessor at that meeting. But we do meet with city staff regularly. Actually, Mr. Freeman and myself spoke to Parks and Rec about it about a week ago or so, in addition to other meetings we've had with them. And most likely, I would think, around budget process time, looking at if it is desired for the board to look at the city possibly purchasing it, that would be a good time to have those discussions. The Parks and Recreation staff and their planning have identified gap areas, as you mentioned, throughout the city, and this site was mentioned in their outdoors plan of 2016. So both sides of staff, both the school division and Parks and Rec, as we do with a lot of our partnerships with the city, have been in communication about it. And one of the reasons we wanted to bring it to you at this point in time, just because of the possible moving up of that date for the PPEA. However, we do still have time to discuss it with that public input, even if that PPA process was to occur over the next year.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for bringing it to this meeting. But I want to encourage my colleagues and staff to move forward and to get all the partners, the schools, the cities, the Park and Rec, all together, and let's move forward as quickly as we can, because I think waiting is not going to be a good thing.
So let's elaborate on that a
Yeah.
little bit. The board has to make some decisions prior to the city and Parks and Rec making any decisions.
Correct.
Right? And before we can do that, we do need to get it subdivided properly so that we
Correct.
know what piece of property we're talking about, because as it sits, you couldn't sell that
Right.
property, right?
Right,
So you
exactly.
need to subdivide it so we know which one we're talking about. Once we get that done, which is why that's the next step, then we would need to get an updated appraisal, so we also know what we're talking about in terms of the property value. Then we can have a conversation with the board. And again, likely, the way that has worked in the past is we have put that into our CIP. So we have estimated the cost, and we put that into our CIP, noting sale or disposal of property. And then we talk with the board about that process and how that would work, and then we'll go into closed session so as to not impact any kind of negotiating conversations with you all, to talk a little bit more about how that process could move forward. And then there would be some questions we would need you to answer, particularly around things like I know has been discussed in other places, first right of refusal and those sorts of things. The board cannot commit to that yet.
Right.
Because the board cannot impact its negotiating stance without some conversations with city council, or with our because we won't be city attorneys by then, but with our council at that point, to make sure that you all are on solid footing and understanding. Does that make sense to everybody?
That sounds perfect.
So we'll get it subdivided, we'll go through that process. We'll get an appraisal done. Once we have all of that information, it's likely to be heading towards the end of the summer and into the fall anyway, which is when we start our CIP conversations with you all. So we'll do it that way.
Okay, thank you. That sounds like a good plan. Thank you so much.
All right, we have Mrs. Manning, then Mrs. Franklin.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar as to Ms. Weems. I know there have been conversations in the past with city council members, along with Ms. Samco and the Arizona Civic League. I think it's important that we continue those conversations with our city council counterparts, and to see if they are going to be willing to provide a park for the neighborhood. I think that it's important for us to have those conversations at the same time as we're exploring all of it, not waiting until it's all subdivided. And I'm happy to reach out to the mayor or Lewis Jones, who's the Bayside rep, and see if we can kind of get those talks going. Thank you.
Well, just to add further to that, so those talks apologies, Mrs. Wright. Those conversations have been ongoing, and there have been some folks at the city, and I do think there's generally interest in that and in that property as a park. I mean, that's what we've had communicated. But again, until the board takes specific action and then council takes specific action, it's, there's not much we can do until then. And so we do need to work through that process on the board side first to make sure the property is available for that conversation.
Thank
So,
you. Mrs. Franklin?
I would like, Dr. Spence, if you could just clarify this for me. So to me, it seems like subdividing is premature if we don't know who and what kind of use that property is going to have after we subdivide. I'm just curious, would we not want to get the options first before we start subdividing?
Unfortunately, no, in this instance, because again, if you look at that line, that property line goes straight through the middle of one of our elementary schools. So we need to move it over to the west of our elementary school property.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's really what it comes
That's-
down to. We need to
okay.
take that, by scale, we need to take that left,
Okay, well, that
orange line
makes,
left
okay,
about
that
like
makes
one
sense, yeah,
finger to.
okay. All right, so thank you, because I was wondering, okay, that makes a lot more sense, thank you.
Anybody else right now? All right, thank you, Ms. Ingram.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the conclusion of today's workshop, and we will reconvene in Chamber 6 o'clock for formal meeting. Meeting adjourned.